So if you're going to double down on your DNA, meaning that you're going to sort of figure out what you're about, and then you're going to put more effort into that particular stuff, how do you actually know what your DNA is? Like, how do you know what are the things you should be working on? And that's a question that comes from Isaac on another YouTube video about this idea of embracing your particular quirks and flaws. I apologize for the dark video. It was a very busy day at work, and then I went straight home. The kids are in bed now, and it's 8:30 in late September, and that sun sets fast. Okay, so Isaac is a young kid. He's a freshman in college. When you're only 18, 19, how do you know what you're about, considering how much of you is going to change? Well, first off, a caveat. Less of you is going to change than you think it is. You know, the big thing that people always say is having kids will change you. It really does, in that it shifts your priorities, and it might shift your priorities enough to start to change your behavior. But in general, you're the same person, just with different responsibilities. You know, if you have ADD that keeps you from keeping track of things, having kids is not going to fix that. Because if that were true, everyone would be an amazing parent, because everybody has kids and everybody has parents, and everybody hates their parents or goes through periods of hating them. So it's not really the case. It doesn't really work like that. But so I operate with this assumption. What I'm like today is pretty much like I have an operating system. That operating system is still going to be in place 10 years from now. My priorities, what I use that operating system for, might change. Who knows? Maybe I'll do medication and diet and exercise, and some of that operating system will change. But in general, I kind of notice I'm the same dude as I was 10 or 15 years ago. It's just my priorities and the things I care about have changed since then, but I'm still the same guy. So that's the first thing. So if you're like 18, you might grow up, but you're still going to be the same person. So so don't assume you're going to magically change, and don't assume that there's no point in understanding what you're about now because you think that's going to change. There's a good chance that what you're about now, if anything, what you're about now is awesome, and it's still gonna be awesome in 10 years. And yeah, I wish I kind of understood myself at 18 or 25 better, because it's still me. So that's my intro. Okay, so if you wanted to figure out though, like, what are your traits and your quirks? And these aren't like your interests, right? Like, my interests change over time. I'm talking about like the things that make you you. So like, let me give you an example. I went to art school. I went to a really good art school. Last year and a half, I did terribly. I rarely finished work. I had like punishing, crushing creative block all the time. I cared deeply. I was passionate about school, and yet it went terribly. So obviously passion was not enough. There were these little things I noticed that I didn't understand them well enough. So a thing that stands out to me is that one day, one of my teachers was pretty much frustrated with my whole class, and she basically said, form into little groups. This plane is awesome. She basically said, form yourselves into little groups and go on some kind of a field trip, and then make something about that when you get back. And I think I made some kind of weird little, I think it was really small, but I made some kind of weird little graphic about parking garages, because we went to downtown Minneapolis and everything was built with these kind of yucky pastel bricks. And it was as if one architect had taken over all of downtown Minneapolis to build these condos and shitty parking garages. I did that. I got it done. It's probably the only thing I got done that semester. Another day, another class I can think of, I think it was typography 2. And we were given a brief, like, design a postcard for a talk by this designer, Michael Worthington, who was somebody I was actually a huge fan of and was familiar with. And I think we had to do it by hand. Like, we had to use photocopies and stuff, I think. I remember just hustling and working super fast over the 3.5, 4 hours that we had to do it, trying a bunch of like interesting little experiments, and having probably 2 things to show that I was really into and that I thought were really cool. And I never revised that ever again. And so I'd have these experiences where I got stuff done really, really fast. Where I faltered was the stuff that was supposed to take time. I didn't know how to expand my process to do that. I also didn't recognize that it would be okay to work fast and not work, I don't know, deeply or rigorously or something like that. But those couple of experiences like that, they constantly, trying to walk out this wind, they constantly stayed with me. So if I were to try to reverse engineer, okay, how do you go back to and figure out those traits of yours that you can work really, really quickly with a bare minimum of revisions, that your best bet is to do maybe 2 versions in a super short period of time, and that your attention span is such that you don't care for revisions or editing beyond slight tweaks of things that might bother you later. That in general, you know how people love to, like, I just read this interview today with Boosie Badass, and they asked him, he dissed some rapper, and that rapper's dead now, and he said, I don't care, I said what I said. That was kind of how I felt about design. I made the thing I made for a reason. It's done. So iterative, fast, kind of impulsive. I do the thing and move on to the next thing. If I had recognized those traits, I might have been able to rework my own curriculum in order to make the last 1.5 years of art school productive. 1, I didn't realize it was an option. 2, I thought I had creative block, which is like a totally different thing. I did have creative block. It was a symptom of my process and my values and my context. They were all out of alignment, so I had creative block. So if I wanted to go back and fix that, what would I do? I'd make like I'd get a little journal, and I'd have like a report card in it for every project, big or small. And I would say, like, okay, what was the context of this project? How big was it? What was the time frame? What was the process I was given? Or what was the process I used? And how happy was I with the results? And how happy was I during the making of the work? I think it could be that simple. It's essentially an overview, which is the context. Then there's the actions you took in order to complete it. And then there is how you felt and how you appraise the output of that project. So let's say it's your first semester at school. You do this for everything. Do it for a in-class assignment. Do it for a 3-week drawing final. Do it for a paper you have to write. Make it so simple that it's really hard to ignore. After maybe 5 or 6 assignments, review it. Start to look for the things that wind through as a pattern, because chances are the way that you draw, the way that you design, the way that you write, they probably have some similarities. They're not totally the same. There's a decent chance they'll have some similarities. So if you take all of that, there's a pretty decent chance that that you'll start to be able to figure out what stuff works for you. And I think that this is important because when I'm talking about something in typography too that went well. That was 2001. So 16 years ago, this dumb little in-class assignment sticks with me. The other thing, 2003, 14 years ago. The first day of working at Target sticks with me because that was when the same values got used in a professional context, and all of a sudden it started to become clear to me that I was wired in a certain way, and that if I could embrace that, I would be happier and I would do better work. So some little kind of journal, and then just review it periodically, and then start to manipulate the pieces, start to formalize a process for the things that you do. And the process is simply, you get a project, or you're going to start a project, or you're going to think about starting a project. What are the actions that you're going to take? That's it. That's all the process is. It's not like some artsy fartsy crap. It's literally like, what are the steps that you're going to take? And then test that process out and start to use it and figure out if it works. Through that, you'll start to figure out what you're about and how you're wired to work. And that, I mean, it can literally make the difference between the amount of shit that I've gotten done in the last 2 weeks and the complete lack of work that I got done from 2002 to 2003 while I was in school, while I was finishing up school, while I was like a great student who was doomed to failure, because I didn't understand what I was about, and I didn't understand that by knowing what I was about, I could reframe and rework what I was doing in school, and I would have done much better work. And I would have, circa 2004 and 5, when I also had I continued to have really bad creative block because it had nothing to do with school. I had to do with this massive misunderstanding of my own wiring. So hopefully that answers the question. But basically, you have to be self-reflective. You have to pay attention to what you're doing. You have to articulate what you're doing, and then you have to analyze however you're recording it. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else to add to that. And then you just test, and you continue to see if it's true. Yeah, that's it. It's basically just a matter of like, you record data, situations, actions, feelings, results, and then you analyze the data. And through that, you'll start to figure out what you're about. And I think another maybe really good example is just, I can look at all the books that I wrote. So I made a book on skateboard graphics. I didn't have to research that because it was an interest of mine. I did a book about 90s punk record covers. I did a book about typography. The period at which I did all those books was just a matter of harvesting the things I was already interested in thinking about, which were largely a matter of, I'm a voracious consumer of all kinds of stuff. If I didn't do those books, maybe I would feel guilty about that. But instead I look at it and go like, oh, my distractions and my collections created the opportunity to do those projects. They create opportunities for me every day because of the fact that my sort of information diet is so unbelievably wide. It's never just been graphic design, or it's never just been art, it's never just been advertising or marketing or music or whatever. It's always been this huge, crazy variety of things, and that served me really well in having interesting experiences and cool opportunities to work on stuff. Man, more planes. So it's like, you understand like what you do, like how do you distract yourself? That's the key point of data, because the point isn't to fix everything. You want to manage your quirks when they get you in trouble, but you can't change them. That's why people who are in AA go to AA meetings every day, because you're wired like that. So you have to do it. But at the same time, you can figure out when to kind of honor and celebrate those same traits for massive doses of productivity and originality. All right, thanks a lot for watching.